Long ago, there was a kingdom called Nalandria. It was a land of green hills, bright rivers, and magic hidden in every tree and stone. People lived in peace. They sang songs in the fields and lit lanterns at night that floated like stars. At the heart of Nalandria was a royal family, kind, wise, and loved by everyone. The king and queen ruled with gentle hands, and their child, a baby girl, was said to carry the light of the kingdom in her heart. But one night, that light was almost lost. A powerful man, hungry for the throne, betrayed them. The palace was attacked. Fires filled the sky. Guards shouted, people ran, and in the chaos, the royal family disappeared. Some believed they all perished. But others whispered a secret, that one child escaped. A baby with a glowing spiral birthmark, hidden far from danger. Years passed. The palace crumbled, and the land grew quiet. The story of Nalandria became a bedtime tale, a forgotten legend. Until now. Because in a quiet village, far from the broken palace, something is stirring again. And the mark is about to return. High in the mountains, far from any kingdom, there was a quiet village where life moved slowly. Stone huts lined the winding dirt paths, and the people lived simply, farming by day, telling stories by firelight at night, and listening to the wind when it whispered through the trees. But one night, the wind did not whisper. It howled. Thunder cracked over the hills, and rain poured from the sky like it had been holding back tears. The villagers stayed inside, afraid of what the storm might bring. Inside her small hut, a woman named Amma sat by her fire when she heard it, a strange sound, faint but clear. A baby's cry. Amma rushed outside with only a shawl around her shoulders. The sound led her to the edge of the village, to the river. There, lying in a basket caught between rocks, was a tiny baby girl, soaking wet but alive. She was wrapped in soft royal cloth, and on her small shoulder something glowed. A spiral-shaped birthmark, shining softly like moonlight. Amma gasped. "The mark of Nalandria," she whispered. She had heard the stories of a lost kingdom, of a child with a glowing mark. But those were just bedtime tales, weren't they? The village healer came and saw the mark too. Her eyes widened with fear and wonder. This is no ordinary child. Amma didn't wait for more questions. She pressed the baby to her chest and whispered, "Your name is Liona, and I will keep you safe." That night, Amma hid the mark beneath warm cloth and whispered to no one what she had seen. Because whatever truth the storm had brought to her doorstep, the world wasn't ready to know it. As the years passed, Liona grew into a quiet, thoughtful girl with eyes that seemed to notice everything. She wasn't like the other children in the village. While they played in the fields or splashed in the river, Liona would sit under trees and listen, really listen, to the wind, the birds, the rustle of leaves. It was as if the world around her was speaking, and only she could hear it. At night, she had strange dreams. In her sleep, voices would whisper her name. Soft, distant voices that spoke in a language she didn't understand, yet somehow felt familiar. Sometimes she woke up with her heart racing, not from fear, but from something she couldn't explain. And then there were the animals. Birds followed her from tree to tree. Cats curled up on her doorstep, even ones that belonged to other families. A fox once appeared in the village square and walked right up to her, staring with eyes full of something ancient. The villagers began to notice. Some called her gifted, others cursed. "She's not normal," a few would mutter. "That girl is touched by spirits." "Or maybe she's the chosen one," others whispered. Liona heard their words. Even when they didn't say them out loud, she could feel their eyes, their fear, their wonder. It made her feel like a stranger in her own home. But not everyone saw her that way. There was one boy, Chemo, who had always been her friend. From the time they could walk, Chemo was beside her. He wasn't afraid of her dreams or the strange way animals acted around her. In fact, he thought it was cool. "You're not weird," he said once. "You're just more awake than the rest of us." Whenever the villagers turned away, Chemo stayed. He made her laugh when she was sad. He asked questions no one else dared to ask. And when Liona told him about the voices in her dreams, he didn't call her strange. He simply said, "Maybe they're trying to tell you something." Liona didn't have all the answers. But with Chemo by her side, she didn't feel alone. Still, deep in her heart, she knew something was coming. And the truth, whatever it was getting closer. Every year, the village held a festival to celebrate the changing seasons. There were colorful fabrics hanging from trees, songs in the air, and children running with painted faces. This year, the festival felt brighter than usual. Even Liona, who usually stayed quiet in the background, joined the fun. She wore a simple dress and danced with the other children while Chemo spun in circles beside her, laughing. At the edge of the festival, sitting beneath a giant tree, was the oracle, an old woman with silver hair and eyes that looked like moonlight. People came from nearby villages just to hear her speak. She rarely said much, but when she did, her words stayed with you forever. Later in the afternoon, curious, Liona and Chemo walked near the oracle's resting place. As they got closer, Liona tripped, and her shawl slipped off her shoulder. That's when it happened. The old oracle's eyes locked on the mark, the glowing spiral on Liona's skin. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The crowd around them grew silent. Even the wind held its breath. The oracle slowly stood up, her hands trembling. "The mark of Nalandria," she whispered. "The royal blood has returned." Gasps filled the air. People turned to stare. Some stepped back. Others fell to their knees. Liona quickly pulled her shawl back over her shoulder, her heart pounding. She grabbed Chemo's hand, and they ran. That night, Liona sat in her room, confused and afraid. The mark she'd hidden her whole life had just changed everything. Then Amma entered the room, holding a small wooden box. Her eyes were full of sadness, but also truth. "There's something you need to know," Amma said softly. "You are not my child by blood." Liona blinked, speechless. "I found you by the river when you were just a baby," Amma continued, "wrapped in royal cloth, with this pendant around your neck." She opened the box. Inside was a small silver pendant with the same spiral shape as Liona's mark. "I knew you were special the moment I saw you, but I wanted you to grow up safe, away from danger, away from those who might still be looking for you." Liona stared at the pendant, her mind spinning. Could it be true? Could she really be part of the lost royal family? The dreams, the voices, the animals, the mark. Suddenly, it all felt connected. And deep inside, something awakened, not just curiosity, but a calling. Liona couldn't sleep that night. She stared at the silver pendant in her hand, the same spiral shape as her birthmark. Her mind was filled with questions. Who were her real parents? What happened to the kingdom of Nalandria? And why had the voices in her dreams always felt so real? By morning, she had made her decision. She would leave the village and find the truth for herself. Downstairs, Amma was already waiting. She had known this day would come, the day when the child she raised would step into her destiny. "You don't have to go," Amma said quietly, her eyes full of worry. "I do," Liona replied. "I need to know who I am." Amma placed the pendant around Liona's neck, her fingers trembling. "This was with you when I found you," she said. "Maybe it will lead you to the answers you seek. But promise me one thing." Liona nodded. "Stay kind. No matter what you find out, stay the girl with a good heart." Liona hugged her tightly, tears in both their eyes. Outside, Chemo stood waiting with a pack on his back and a big smile on his face. "You didn't think I'd let you go alone, did you?" he said. Liona smiled. "You don't have to do this, Chemo." "I know," he said. "But you're my best friend. If you're walking into mystery and danger, I'm walking with you." And so, with only a map, a pendant, and each other, they set off. The village faded behind them, and the forest rose ahead, tall, wide, and full of secrets. They didn't know where the path would lead. But Liona held her head high, the pendant warm against her chest, her heart beating with a mix of fear and hope. For the first time in her life, she was walking toward her true story. The forest was not like anything Liona or Chemo had ever seen before. It was deep, green, and quiet, almost too quiet. The trees stood tall like guards, their branches twisting together to block out the sun. As they walked deeper, the path behind them seemed to vanish, like the forest was swallowing it up. "This place is alive," Liona whispered. It didn't take long before strange things began to happen. They came across a clearing where the trees whispered in voices that sounded like children. Chemo tried to step forward, but the ground turned to mist under his feet. Liona grabbed his hand just in time, and the path returned. Then came a tree with glowing fruit. It looked delicious, but when Chemo reached for one, a loud hiss echoed through the branches, and the fruit turned black and dropped to the ground. They learned quickly. The forest was testing them. One night, they found a stone with ancient carvings. The words shifted and danced before their eyes. "It's a riddle," Liona said. She read it aloud, and suddenly, the stone split open, revealing a safe path forward. And with every step, something inside Liona began to change. When Chemo scraped his arm on a sharp branch, Liona placed her hand on the wound. Her mark glowed softly, and the cut healed before their eyes. When they were lost and hungry, a squirrel appeared and chirped loudly. Liona listened, and somehow understood. It led them to fresh water and wild berries. She didn't know how she was doing it, but deep inside it felt right. "It's like the forest knows you," Chemo said one night as they rested under a tree. "Like it's been waiting for you." Liona looked up at the stars. "I don't feel afraid anymore." Just then, in the distance, a pair of glowing eyes appeared between the trees. A white wolf. It stood still, watching them silently. Its fur shimmered in the moonlight, and its eyes looked ancient, wise, and calm. Then, just as silently, it turned and vanished into the trees. "Did you see that?" Chemo whispered. Liona nodded slowly. "Yes." She didn't know why, but she felt like the wolf wasn't just watching. It was guarding her. After days of walking, the forest suddenly grew quiet, not in a scary way, but like it was holding its breath. Liona and Chemo pushed past a wall of thick vines and stopped. Before them stood the broken remains of a castle. It was overgrown with moss and wrapped in roots, like nature had tried to hide it. Cracked stone towers reached up through the trees, and shattered windows still shimmered in the light. It was both beautiful and sad. "Is this?" Chemo began. Liona nodded. "Nalandria." They stepped inside slowly. The air was cool and still. The grand hall was covered in fallen leaves. Birds flew overhead, nesting where kings and queens once walked. Liona's pendant began to glow softly. It pulled her toward a wall at the back of the hall, a large stone seal carved with the same spiral as her mark. Without thinking, she reached out and placed her hand on it. Her mark lit up. The wall rumbled and slowly opened. Behind it was a secret chamber. Dust filled the air, and spiderwebs hung like curtains. In the center stood an old mirror with a silver frame shaped like wings. Liona stepped closer, and the mirror shimmered. Then a vision appeared. A man and woman stood side by side. The man wore royal armor, and the woman had a crown of vines and stars. They smiled with warmth and strength. Liona's heart pounded. "They're my parents," she whispered. The vision showed them holding a baby wrapped in a blanket, her. Then the mirror showed fire. Running. A woman placing the baby in a basket and sending it down a river. Tears filled Liona's eyes. It was all true. She was the baby that escaped. The child with the mark. The last heir of Nalandria. Chemo stood quietly beside her. "You're not just special, Liona," he said. "You're a queen." Liona stared at the mirror one last time. Her parents were gone, but she was still here. And now, she knew who she truly was. Inside the hidden chamber, Liona and Chemo searched carefully. Every object felt like a piece of a forgotten story. Behind a cracked bookshelf, they found a small wooden box sealed with wax. Inside it was a scroll, old and fragile, wrapped in silk. Liona gently unrolled it. The writing was faded, but the words were still clear. It was a royal record, and it told a terrible truth. Years ago, the king's own brother, Lord Varun, had betrayed the royal family. He wanted the throne for himself. On the night of the betrayal, he led an army into the palace. The king and queen were attacked. Everything was burned, and the baby princess was sent away to safety before the final gate fell. Lord Varun then declared the royal line dead. He erased every trace, burned records, tore down symbols, and silenced anyone who questioned him. He became ruler of the land, but not with love or honor. He ruled through fear, using soldiers and shadows to keep people quiet. Liona's hands trembled as she finished reading. "My own uncle," she whispered. "He destroyed everything. He took the kingdom, and he thinks I'm gone." Chemo looked serious now. "What will you do?" Liona stood tall. For the first time, her voice didn't shake. "I have to go to the capital. I have to face him. This isn't just about me anymore. Nalandria still lives, and it's waiting for its true queen." Chemo nodded. "Then we face him together." The forest seemed to echo around them, the trees, the air, even the earth holding its breath again. Because the child with the royal birthmark was no longer running from her past. She was walking straight into it. The road to the capital was long and dangerous. Liona and Chemo stayed hidden in the shadows, avoiding towns and keeping to the trees. They could feel the air changing. The closer they got, the darker the sky seemed, not from clouds, but from fear that hung over the land like a heavy curtain. Late one evening, just as they crossed an old stone bridge, they heard the sound of horses. Before they could run, soldiers in black armor surrounded them. Their leader stepped forward and shouted, "By order of Lord Varun, you are under arrest." Chemo tried to protect Liona, but there were too many. They were taken in chains to a dark prison carved into the side of a hill. The walls were damp, and the light barely reached the floor. They were locked in a cell together, but they weren't alone. In the corner sat a young man with sharp eyes and a scar across his cheek. "New prisoners?" he asked, standing slowly. Liona didn't answer. She didn't trust anyone. But then he saw the mark on her shoulder, the spiral that glowed faintly, even in the darkness. He dropped to one knee. You're real," he said, his voice full of wonder. the child of the old kings, the heir of Nalandria. Liona stepped back, surprised. Who are you? My name is Tarek, he said. I was a boy when the palace burned. My family served the crown before Lord Varun destroyed it all. I've waited my whole life for this moment. He looked at her, eyes shining. You are the hope we've waited for. For the first time in days, Liona felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Belief. They spoke through the night, whispering plans. Tarek knew the guards' routines and where the keys were kept. He had already been planning an escape. He just hadn't had a reason to try. Now, with Liona here, everything had changed. By dawn, they were ready. The true heir was rising, and she would not be caged for long. Before the sun had fully risen, the prison doors creaked open. Tarek moved quickly. He had picked the lock and knocked out the guard with quiet skill. Liona, Chemo, and Tarek slipped through the shadows, their footsteps light and hearts pounding. Outside, hidden in the woods beyond the prison, a small group of rebels waited. Men and women with tired eyes and brave hearts. When they saw Liona and the glowing mark on her shoulder, they dropped to one knee. She is the one, Tarek said. The true heir has returned. Together, they made their way toward the capital. Word spread like wildfire. Whispers in the streets, quiet songs in the markets, symbols drawn in chalk on broken walls. The girl with the mark is real. The child of Nalandria lives. By the time they reached the city gates, hundreds had gathered. Some watched in silence. Others wept. A few still feared Lord Varun, but many were tired of his rule. Liona stood tall before them, heart racing. She lifted her pendant for all to see, the spiral symbol of her family, and pulled back her cloak to reveal the mark on her shoulder. This mark, she said, is not just mine. It belongs to all of you, to a kingdom that was stolen, to a land that still remembers its light. The crowd gasped. Suddenly, a sound rose in the distance, a low, deep howl. From the trees, the white wolf appeared. But this time, it changed. Its body shimmered, glowing brighter and brighter until it stood tall, no longer just a wolf, but a guardian spirit of Nalandria. It looked down at Liona and bowed. The people fell silent. Then someone in the crowd shouted, "Long live the true heir!" Another raised an old banner of Nalandria, once hidden, now flying high. The city, long held in fear, began to wake. One by one, the people stepped forward, not with weapons, but with belief, because the child with the royal birthmark had come, and they were ready to rise with her. The bells of the capital rang for the first time in years, not to warn of danger, but to announce something new. Liona, the true heir of Nalandria, had returned, and the city was rising with her. But deep in the palace, Lord Varun heard the bells, and sent his soldiers to crush the hope before it could grow. Armored men marched through the streets, shouting threats and swinging swords. But they were not met with fear. They were met by the people. Men, women, even children stood together, blocking the roads. Farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, all standing behind Liona. Chemo, Tarek, and the rebels guided her safely through the crowd. "We don't fight with hate," Liona said. "We lead with truth." When the soldiers saw the mark on her shoulder and the spirit wolf walking beside her, many of them lowered their weapons. They had heard the stories, and now they believed. The palace gates opened, and Liona walked inside. The halls were cold and silent. She climbed the grand staircase, her footsteps echoing. At the top, in the throne room, sat Lord Varun. He stood when he saw her, eyes wide with shock. "You," he spat. You're just a child. I'm the child you tried to erase, Liona said calmly. But I'm still here. Varun laughed. Prove it. Liona said nothing. She stepped forward and placed her hand on the stone seal carved into the throne. For a moment, all was still. Then, the spiral mark on her shoulder lit up, brighter than ever before. The seal on the throne glowed in response, and unlocked with a soft click. The throne welcomed her. Varun's smile disappeared. The guards inside the room dropped to one knee. Liona turned to him. You are not my enemy anymore, but you will never rule again. Lord Varun was taken away in silence. He was exiled, not with violence, but with justice. Outside, the people cheered as Liona stepped onto the palace balcony. She didn't wave. She placed her hand over her heart and bowed to them, to the people who had waited so long for hope. And just like that, Nalandria began to heal. The mountains stood tall and peaceful once more. At the heart of the capital, the sun rose gently over the palace, no longer broken, but reborn. The walls had been rebuilt, the gardens had bloomed again, and laughter had returned to the streets of Nalandria. Inside, the great hall was filled with light and people from every corner of the land. Today was a day of celebration. Liona, now dressed in a royal robe of green and silver, walked slowly toward the throne, not just as the girl with the glowing mark, but as the rightful queen. The people cheered, drums echoed through the hall, and flower petals fell from the balconies. When she reached the throne, she paused, looked around, and smiled. Beside her stood Chemo, no longer just her best friend, but her chief advisor, wise, loyal, and still carrying that same spark of curiosity he'd always had. Tears filled Alma's eyes as she watched from the front row. She had raised Liona with love, and now watched her rise into her full truth. Outside in the palace garden, a statue of Liona's parents stood tall, the king and queen of old, their hands resting on the shoulder of a small child carved in stone. The same spiral mark glowed softly on the statue's shoulder. Liona visited it every morning, not to mourn the past, but to remember who she came from, and to honor what they gave her, not a throne, but the chance to choose who she would become. One day, as she walked through the city, a little girl tugged her mother's sleeve and pointed at the queen. "I want to be like her," she whispered. Liona knelt beside her and smiled kindly. "You can," she said. "We all have a mark. We just have to follow it." The wind blew softly through the streets. The same wind that had once carried a baby down a river, now carried hope through an entire kingdom. And so, the girl with the royal birthmark became more than a queen. She became a legend, not because of her mark, but because she answered its call. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories. Turn on your notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.